My name is Jonas. I'm 34 years old, and this story happened to me just a few months ago. I'm not the type to make things up, so you can believe me. This is all true. I still shake just thinking about it. I lived on a farm in the interior of Pará, near Altamira, a place surrounded by dense jungle where the night's silence is only broken by the sounds of animals. Or at least that's how it was until it showed up. The farm had been in my family for generations. It wasn't luxurious, but we got by. Me, my wife Clara, our 8-year-old son Pedro, and a handful of workers. We raised cattle, planted cassava, and life was peaceful. Until one full moon night, yeah, I know it sounds cliché, but that's exactly how it went. Everything changed. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to a noise that sounded like it came straight from hell. A deep, hoarse roar that made the wooden walls of the house vibrate. My wife was already sitting up in bed, pale as a ghost, clutching the rosary she always carried. "Jonas, what is that?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I grabbed the shotgun from the corner of the room and went to the window. What I saw, man, I'll never forget. In the middle of the corral, lit by the silvery moonlight, there was this thing. It wasn't a wolf, it wasn't a man, it was both. At least 6 feet tall, body covered in thick black fur, yellow eyes glowing like embers. Its claws were so huge they tore up the earth as it walked, and the mouth, God Almighty, the mouth full of jagged teeth, drooling blood. Blood from our cattle. It had already gutted 3 cows, pieces scattered like a slaughterhouse. I yelled for the workers to wake up, but before anyone could do anything, the beast turned its head toward me. It looked at me, man. Looked right at me like it knew who I was. Then it charged. It didn't run like an animal. It ran like something hunting me. The front door exploded into splinters when it slammed into it, and I fired. The shot hit its shoulder, but it was like shooting a tree trunk. It didn't even flinch. Clara was screaming. Pedro was crying, and all I could think was, "We're gonna die here." It burst into the living room, tearing everything apart. The sofa became rags. The wooden table my grandfather made shattered into pieces. I fired again, this time in the chest, and it let out a roar that made my ears ring. Dark blood oozed out, but it didn't fall. It lunged, and I just managed to shove Clara and Pedro into the back room and lock the door. The beast started pounding, its claws piercing the wood like paper. I knew we had seconds. That's when I heard the engines. A loud, cutting roar, slicing through the night silence like a sharp knife through fresh meat. My heart, already pounding, nearly exploded in my chest. I knew what it was. My workers, those simple, tough guys with more courage than sense, had grabbed the old motorcycles we used to patrol the farm. They were coming full throttle down the bumpy dirt roads around the property, the noise of the bikes mixing with their hoarse shouts of desperation and fury. Through the window cracks, I saw the flickering lights of the torches they carried, flames dancing in the dark like the last thread of hope in a nightmare gone too far. Besides the torches, they had sickles, machetes, anything that could pass for a weapon. Crazy, brave fools thinking they could face what even I, with a shotgun in hand, couldn't stop. It was like they decided to take on the devil himself bare-handed, without a second thought. And me, trapped in there with my wife sobbing quietly and my son shaking in my arms, I could only watch paralyzed, knowing what came next would be a bloodbath. The werewolf, that infernal monster that had invaded my home and my life, turned toward them. It wasn't slow or hesitant. It was fast, precise, like a predator who already knew the prey was done for. The full moon's light hit its thick black fur, making every muscle gleam with an otherworldly strength. Those yellow eyes, 2 burning coals in the dark, locked onto my men. And I swear I saw a glint of satisfaction there, like it had been waiting. For this, like it wanted more flesh to tear, more blood to spill. It let out a low, guttural roar that shook the ground and made the house windows rattle, a sound straight from the depths of hell. Then it attacked. It didn't run. It flew, a blur of claws and teeth slicing through the night like a blade. What happened next was a massacre, a horror show I'll never get out of my head, no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I pray to forget. I saw it all through the window, every second of carnage, every drop of blood flying through the air. Zay, our oldest hand, a guy in his 50s, tough as iron who'd faced jaguars and snakes without blinking, was the first to go. He was in front, holding a torch in one hand and a machete in the other, yelling something I couldn't make out over the bike noise and wind. The werewolf didn't give him a chance. With one swipe of those black, curved claws, it ripped off Zay's arm. It wasn't clean or quick. It was brutal, savage, like the beast enjoyed the shredding. The arm flew through the air, still gripping the machete, and hit the dirt with a dull thud, while blood sprayed from Zay's shoulder like a hot red fountain, spreading a metallic smell I could catch even inside the house. He dropped to his knees, screaming a hoarse, desperate cry that cut off when the monster struck again, tearing open his chest like paper. Zay's body collapsed into a heap of flesh and bone that didn't look human anymore, and the werewolf didn't even pause to look. It was already on to the next. Zay's blood splattered Manuel's face. He was right behind on his bike. The kid was new, maybe 20, just started working a few months back. The poor guy didn't have time to react. The hot liquid hit his eyes, blinding him for a second, and he lost control of the bike. The front wheel skidded on the blood-soaked dirt, and the machine flipped, throwing Manuel to the ground with a terrified yell. He tried to get up, groping for the sickle that had fallen, but the werewolf was on him. I saw the claws clamp around the kid's neck like an iron vise, and the sound, man, the sound of that bone snapping still echoes in my head. It was a sharp, loud crack, followed by a horrible gurgle as blood bubbled up Manuel's throat and spilled from his mouth. The beast lifted him off the ground, holding the limp body like a trophy, then hurled it against the wire fence which buckled under the impact. The body hung there, eyes wide open, staring at nothing, while the werewolf roared. Again, a victory sound that turned my stomach. The other workers, 4 or 5 still alive, tried to fight. They really did. I saw João, a skinny but gutsy guy, throw a torch at the monster. The flame hit its fur, and for a second, I thought it might work. Fire licked up its shoulder, and the smell of burning hair filled the air, but the werewolf didn't budge. It shook off the flames like a breeze and charged João. The machete he held was useless. The monster caught it mid-air, twisted João's wrist until the bone cracked, then plunged its claws into his chest, yanking out a mess of flesh and blood that hit the dirt with a wet slap. João's scream died in his throat, and his body crumpled. As the others backed away, yelling, tripping over each other trying to flee, there was no escape. The werewolf was in control, and it knew it. It grabbed the next one, Raimundo, a strong guy who bragged about bar fights with thugs. The beast lifted him off the ground with one hand, claws digging into his shoulders, and bit down. It wasn't just any bite, it was savage, teeth ripping through Raimundo's neck like butter. Blood arced out, painting the ground red, and the body dropped, still twitching while the monster chewed a chunk of flesh it had torn off. I couldn't look away, no matter how much I wanted to. The horror held me there, forcing me to watch every detail of that slaughter. The bike engines were still running, spewing smoke, but no one was riding anymore. The few left were running on foot, screaming for help, but the werewolf let none escape. It pounced on the last one, Carlinhos, a 17-year-old kid just there to help his widowed mom. The beast knocked him down, raking its claws across his back, opening flesh to the bone. Carlinhos' scream was the worst. High-pitched, desperate, broken by sobs as he tried to crawl away, but the werewolf stomped on his legs, crushing the bones. With a crack I heard from inside. Then it finished him with a blow to the head that caved in his skull like a ripe watermelon. When the silence returned, it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of death. The farm ground was covered in blood, chunks of meat, broken weapons, and overturned bikes. The werewolf stood in the middle of it all, breathing heavily, chest heaving, muzzle smeared red. It turned its head toward me again, and I felt its gaze pierce the window, pierce my soul. It didn't come after me right then, but I knew it wasn't over. It was marking me, warning me it'd return. That's when I decided. I had to get my family out of there, or we'd be next. I took advantage of the distraction and ran with my family to the truck. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it in my throat, like it might burst any second. The screams of my men being torn apart echoed outside, mixed with the rumble of fallen bikes and that monster's guttural roar. I didn't have time to think, no time for pity or fear, just instinct screaming inside me. Run, Jonas, run, or you're next. Clara was clinging to Pedro, both shaking like leaves, eyes wide with terror, breaths short and ragged, almost choking on the heavy air of blood and death filling the house. I grabbed her arm, practically dragging them across the wooden floor of the living room, while the cracks from the back room door the werewolf had nearly smashed still rang in my head. Every step felt like an eternity. Every creak of the floorboards was a warning that time was running out, that the beast could return any moment and catch us before we escaped. I reached the back door, that narrow exit to the yard where the truck was parked, an old rusty F-1000 that had never let me down. I kicked it open, the wood slamming against the wall echoing like a gunshot in the brief silence that had fallen over the house. The night air hit my face, humid and hot, laced with the scent of wet earth and the metallic stink of blood carried on the wind. Clara stumbled, nearly fell, but I held her tight, pulling her out while Pedro whimpered softly, clinging to her skirt, his little face streaked with tears and dust. Run, run, run. I was yelling it more to myself than them, because I knew we were seconds from becoming that monster's meal. The truck was about 30 feet away, its silver bed gleaming under the full moon like a beacon in that nightmare. I shoved them into the passenger seat, almost pushing them inside, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the key from my pants pocket. I jumped into the driver's seat, slamming the door with a metallic clang that cut the air like a war cry. I jammed the key into the ignition, twisting it desperately, praying the old engine wouldn't fail me now. The truck roaring to life was music to my ears, a rough, powerful growl that drowned out the sounds of death from the corral for a moment. I floored the accelerator, tires screeching on the dry dirt, kicking up gravel as we shot down the bumpy farm road. The windshield was fogged, but I didn't have time to wipe it. I just wanted distance, just wanted to get my family out of that. Hell, before the werewolf decided killing my men wasn't enough. Clara held Pedro in her lap, murmuring words I couldn't catch, maybe a prayer, maybe begging forgiveness for what we'd seen, while the boy sobbed, his face buried in her chest, tiny hands clutching her shirt like it was his last lifeline. As I drove, the headlights slicing through the darkness, I couldn't stop checking the rearview mirror. Every curve, every shadow, I thought I'd see it. That monster, that thing neither man nor beast, but a piece of hell walking the earth, and then I did see it in the rear view, right in the middle of the road, lit by the red taillights. It stood there, still as a statue, but with a presence that made the air heavy in my lungs. The werewolf stared at me, yellow eyes glowing like embers. In the dark, muzzle dripping red blood onto the dirt, a chunk of flesh dangling from its mouth, swaying as it breathed heavily. It was a piece from one of my men. Maybe Zay, maybe Manuel, I don't know and don't want to. Blood trickled over its jagged teeth, staining the black fur on its chest. And I swear I saw a smile, a cruel grin, like it enjoyed watching me flee, like it knew I was running in vain. It didn't chase, it didn't need to. It just stood planted in the road, its massive body blocking the path we'd left behind, claws dug into the earth like claiming territory. In that moment, as I accelerated, harder, the engine screaming under the strain, I felt it speaking to me without words. Those eyes pierced through, like it had memorized my scent, my fear, my soul. I know where you are, it seemed to say, and I'll be back. It wasn't an empty threat, it was a promise, a certainty that shook me to my bones, making me grip the wheel, so tight my knuckles went white. I knew it wasn't done, that the farm massacre was just the start. It would hunt me, find me, no matter where. The full moon shone in the sky, casting long shadows on the road, and I felt the weight of that gaze on my back even as the distance grew. The truck bounced on the potholed path, tires grinding against rocks, engine whining in protest, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. Every yard between us and that monster was a shot at survival, a chance to keep my family alive. Clara was quiet now, just Pedro's muffled sobs filling the cab's silence. I glanced at her sideways, her pale face reflected in the glass, eyes red, from crying, and wondered if she'd seen what I had in the mirror, if she felt it wasn't over. The road seemed endless, the thick jungle swallowing the headlights on both sides like a tunnel with no exit. But I kept going, foot to the floor, heart in my mouth, sweat dripping down my forehead and stinging my eyes. But I didn't blink. Couldn't blink, because if I looked in the rear view again and it wasn't there, it meant it was coming, closer than I thought. We drove for hours, or what felt like it. The sky started lightening on the horizon, dark blue fading to pale gray, and I felt a tiny, almost meaningless relief, because daylight didn't change what happened. It didn't erase the blood, the screams, the mangled bodies I'd left behind. Didn't erase that werewolf's stare branded in my mind like a hot iron. When we finally hit the city, the sun was rising, and I pulled the truck into an empty gas station, hands still trembling on the wheel, body aching from tension. Clara looked at me, eyes full of questions she didn't dare ask, and Pedro slept in her lap, exhausted, his face crusted with dried tears. I said nothing, just killed the engine and sat there, staring at nothing, trying to wrap my head around how my life had turned into this nightmare. But one thing I knew, it hadn't chased because it didn't need to. It knew where I was, and it would return. We left the farm that night. No time for goodbyes. No time to grab anything but what was on our backs, sweat and dust-soaked clothes, fear clinging to our skin like a second layer, and the weight of everything we'd seen and heard in that infernal night. I didn't look back as the truck rumbled down the dirt road, headlights cutting the darkness, like dull knives lighting up bits of brush and shadows that seemed to move on their own. Clara was huddled in the passenger seat, holding Pedro tight, both silent. A heavy silence broken only by the engine and the boy's low whimpers, more like a wounded animal than anything human. I took nothing. No photos, no papers, no tools. My grandfather left me. Just my family and whatever was left of my sanity, if you could call it that. My head was a whirlwind of bloody images. Zay's arm torn off, Manuel's neck snapped, the werewolf staring at me in the rearview with those yellow eyes that burned my soul. I knew if I stopped to think, if I let it all catch up, I'd break. But I couldn't. Not there, not then. I drove with my foot nailed to the pedal, hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles blanched, like that was the only thing holding me together. We reached the city as the sun rose, a gray, lifeless dawn that brought no relief. I parked at an empty gas station, the engine sputtering before dying, and sat staring at the horizon, trying to fathom how my life crumbled in hours. Clara said nothing, just gazed at the fogged window, eyes red from tears, hands still shaking. As she stroked Pedro's hair, he'd finally dozed off, worn out from fear. I knew we couldn't go back to the farm. That place, my family's home for generations, was now a grave, a field of blood and death I never wanted to see again. So I made the quickest, hardest decision of my life. I sold the truck, not for much, just enough for rent on a cramped little room on the city's outskirts, a spot with thin walls, moldy smell, and one tiny window that barely let light in. The buyer didn't ask why I was in such a rush. He just took the keys and handed over the cash. I walked out with my family under my arm, carrying nothing but a bag of used clothes from a thrift shop on the way. That's all we had now. A dingy room, old rags, and the hope that the nightmare stayed buried in those cursed Para lands. But the nightmare didn't end. It never does, right? You can run, hide, but some things find you, mark you like cattle for slaughter. The first days in the city were a blur. I barely slept, barely ate, just sat in the wobbly chair in that room, staring at the door, waiting. Always. Waiting for that deep roar to cut the night silence again. Clara tried keeping things normal for Pedro, cooking with what little we had, telling him bedtime stories, but I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear I carried in my chest. The boy didn't talk much, just drew things in the corner. Dark scribbles, tall figures with big eyes and jagged teeth, and I knew he was drawing it. The werewolf, the monster that destroyed everything we knew. I tried telling myself it was his head playing tricks, trauma messing with the kid's imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. Something was wrong. Something was coming. I felt it on my skin, like a chill that wouldn't leave. A weight, growing heavier each day. Last week, the worst happened. It was a hot, stuffy night, the kind that makes sweat stick to your clothes and sleep a luxury you can't grab. I was lying on the makeshift bed of old mattresses trying to close my eyes, trying to forget, when Pedro's scream tore through the quiet. It was sharp, desperate, making me bolt up with my heart in my throat, body iced with dread. "Dad, it's here! The hairy man is at the window!" he yelled, pointing at the fogged glass, eyes bulging, little hands shaking as he huddled in the bed corner. Clara rushed to him, hugging the boy, trying to soothe him, but I was already on my feet, blood pounding in my temples, fear turning into something alive inside me. I went to the window, heart racing so fast I could hardly breathe, and yanked. The curtain open. Nothing outside, just the dark street, a flickering streetlight on the corner, the heavy midnight silence. But I knew he wasn't making it up. Pedro didn't lie. Not about this. I stepped out with a cheap flashlight we'd bought for $2 at a corner store, the beam shaking in my hand as I scanned outside. Then I saw the marks. Deep, long scratches gouged into the building's concrete wall, right by the window. Not knife marks, not from any normal animal, claws, big and curved, that had ripped the cement like paper. Air stuck in my throat, stomach churning as I ran my fingers over the grooves, feeling the rough texture, picturing those black, sharp claws I'd seen on the farm, the same ones that tore off Zay's arm, gutted Manuel. It had been there. The werewolf had been right outside my room, so close I could almost smell it, that reek of blood and wet fur I'd never forget. It didn't break in, didn't make noise, but it left the marks like a warning, a message scrawled in twisted lines on the wall. "I found you. I don't sleep anymore." I stay up, sitting in the chair, staring at the window, flashlight in hand, heart racing at every street noise. Clara tries convincing me it's in my head, that we're safe now, but I see the fear in her eyes, the same fear Pedro carries in his drawings. The wall marks don't lie. It's coming. It didn't finish with me. I know it's out there, waiting, lurking, in shadows, yellow eyes glowing in the dark, muzzle bloodied, claws ready to rip apart what's left of my life. I fled the farm, but not it. It marked me that night, and now it's toying with me like a predator letting prey run just to hunt again. I don't know how much time I have, don't know when it'll knock down the door or shatter the window, but I know it will. And when it comes, I don't know if I'll have the strength to fight, to protect my family, to survive. All I know is the nightmare didn't end. It just changed addresses. So, folks, I'm sharing this because I need to get it out. And if anyone in Para has seen this thing, help me, because I don't know how long before it finds me again. The days after finding those claw marks on the wall dragged on like a fever dream. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of wind outside the window, felt like a countdown ticking closer to 0. I kept the flashlight by my side, its weak beam, my only defense against the darkness, though I knew it was useless against it. Clara tried to hold things together, keeping Pedro distracted with games or stories, but her hands trembled when she poured coffee and her eyes darted to the door. Every few minutes, she didn't say it, but she felt it too. The weight of something watching, waiting. Pedro stopped drawing altogether, which was worse. The kid just sat in the corner of our cramped room, staring at the wall, his little face blank like he'd seen. Too much to process. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that we were safe, but the words stuck in my throat. How do you lie to a kid when you know the truth is out there, sharpening its claws? I started walking the streets at night, not because I was brave, God, no, but because I couldn't sit still. The city was different from the farm, concrete instead of dirt, streetlights instead of moonlight, but it didn't feel safer. The shadows between buildings seemed too deep, too alive. I'd shine my flashlight into alleys, half expecting those yellow eyes to stare back. Once, I thought I heard it, a low growl just beyond the edge of the light, but when I swung the beam, there was nothing but a stray dog rooting through trash. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd collapse, but I kept walking, telling myself I had to know, had to be sure it wasn't close. Deep down, I knew better. It was close. It was always close. One night, about a week after the claw marks, I came back to the room around 3 a.m. My shoes were caked in mud from wandering the outskirts, where the city gave way to patches of jungle that reminded me too much of the farm. I was exhausted, my eyes burning, but sleep was a stranger now. As I fumbled with the key in the lock, I noticed something off. The doorframe, cheap, splintered wood, had fresh scratches, not as deep as the ones on the wall, but unmistakable. Long, deliberate lines like someone had dragged a knife across it. Only it wasn't a knife. I froze, the key halfway turned, my breath catching in my chest. I scanned the empty street behind me, the flickering streetlight casting jagged shadows. Nothing, but the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, and that smell, faint but there, the wet, bloody reek of fur and death. I pushed the docker open, my heart hammering, and checked on Clara and Pedro. They were asleep, or at least pretending to be, curled up together on the mattress. I didn't wake them. What could I say? That it was here again, leaving its calling card? The next morning, I went to the local market, hoping to find someone, anyone, who might know something about this thing. Altamira's not a big city, but word travels fast, especially among the old-timers who've lived on the edges of the jungle their whole lives. I found an old man selling herbs at a stall, his face weathered like tree bark, eyes sharp despite his age. His name was Seu Raimundo, and he had a reputation for knowing things, stories, legends, stuff most folks dismissed as superstition. I didn't have much to offer, but I bought a bundle of dried leaves I didn't need and leaned in close, keeping my voice low. "You ever hear of something in the jungle?" I started. "Big, like a man, but not, covered in fur, with claws and yellow. Eyes?" His eyes narrowed and he stopped arranging his herbs. For a moment, he just stared at me, like he was weighing whether I could handle the truth. Then he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You saw it, didn't you? The bicho homum." My stomach twisted at the name. He didn't say werewolf, but I knew that's what he meant. He told me stories, old ones passed down from his grandfather, about a creature that wasn't born but made, cursed by blood and vengeance, bound to the full moon. It wasn't just a beast, he said. It was smart, cruel, and it didn't kill for hunger. It killed because it wanted to. He said it marked its prey, followed them, toyed with them until it was ready to finish the job. "If it saw you," he warned, "it knows you now. It'll find you, no matter where you go." I asked if there was a way to stop it. He shook his head, his eyes dark. "Some say silver, some say fire. But the old ones, they say you don't stop it. You just pray it gets bored and moves on." He handed me a small pouch of herbs, some kind of protection charm, he said, though he didn't sound convinced it would work. I took it anyway, more out of desperation than belief, and slipped it into my pocket. As I walked back to the room, his words echoed in my head. "It knows you now. It'll find you." The pouch felt like a pebble against the weight of that truth. That night, I rigged up what I could. I nailed boards over the window, wedged a chair against the door, and kept the flashlight and an old kitchen knife by my side. Clara watched me in silence, her face pale, but she didn't argue. She knew what I was doing, even if we didn't talk about it. Pedro was quieter than ever, clutching a tattered stuffed bear he'd found in the thrift shop bag. I tried to smile at him, to say something reassuring, but my voice cracked and I gave up. Around midnight, the air changed. Thick, heavy, like before a storm, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The streetlight outside flickered, then went out completely, plunging the street into darkness. I gripped the knife, my palms sweaty, and listened. Nothing at first, just the hum of the city, distant dogs barking, a car horn far off. Then it came, a low, rumbling growl, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. But it grew louder, closer, vibrating through the walls like it had that night on the farm. I stood, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, and moved to the window, peering through the gaps between the boards. The street was empty, but the shadows seemed to shift, curling like smoke. Then I saw it, not the whole thing, just a glimpse. A massive shape, hunched, moving fast across the alley opposite our building. Those yellow eyes caught the moonlight, for a split second before vanishing. My heart stopped. I wanted to scream, to wake Clara and Pedro and run, but where to? There was no outrunning this thing. Seu Raimundo's words burned in my mind. "It'll find you." The growl came again, closer, now, right outside the building. I heard a scrape, claws on concrete, slow and deliberate like it was circling, savoring the moment. Clara woke up, her eyes wide, and grabbed Pedro, pulling him close. "Jonas," she whispered, her voice shaking. I held up a hand, signaling her to stay quiet, and crept to the door. The chair I'd wedged against it was still in place, but the wood creaked, like something heavy was pressing against it. Then, a thud. Not loud, but solid, like a fist testing the door's strength. My grip tightened on the knife, though I knew it was as useless as spitting at a fire. Another thud, harder this time, and the door frame groaned. Pedro whimpered, and Clara clamped a hand over his mouth, her eyes locked on mine, pleading. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe stupidity, maybe desperation. But I grabbed the pouch of herbs from my pocket, ripped it open, and threw it toward the door. The dried leaves scattered across the floor, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the growling stopped. Dead silence. I held my breath, waiting, listening. A minute passed, then 2. No thuds, no scrapes, no growls. I edged toward the door, knife raised, and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the city coming back to life. I didn't dare open it, not till morning. When the sun finally rose, I checked outside. The doorframe had new scratches, deeper than before, and the concrete below was marked with long, curved gouges like it had been pacing, clawing the ground. But it was gone. For now. I didn't feel relief, though. Just dread, heavier than ever. It wasn't bored, like Seu Raimundo had said. It was playing, drawing this out, letting me think I had a chance. Clara and Pedro didn't leave the room that day. I didn't either. We sat there, the 3 of us, trapped in that moldy box, waiting for night to fall again. I keep the knife close, the flashlight closer, and I pray. Not to God, because I'm not sure he's listening anymore, but to whatever might keep that thing away. I know it's out there, watching, its yellow eyes burning in the dark, its claws itching for blood, and I know it's not done with me. Not yet. The herbs from So Raimundo bought us a night or two of uneasy quiet, but it was like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Temporary, futile. I could feel the thing's presence lingering in the air, a thick, oppressive fog that made every breath feel labored. Clara started whispering prayers under her breath whenever the sun dipped low, her rosary beads clicking like tiny bones in the silence of our room. Pedro, poor kid, had taken to hiding under the thin blanket during the day, peeking out only when hunger forced him. His eyes, those innocent blue eyes that used to sparkle with laughter, now held shadows too deep for an 8-year-old. I caught him mumbling to himself once, something about the hairy man wants to play, and it chilled me more than any growl ever could. Was it toying with us all now, extending its hunt to break our spirits before the final strike? I couldn't just wait anymore. Sitting in that room felt like being buried alive, the walls closing in with every passing hour. So I went back to So Raimundo's stall the next day, my pockets empty but my desperation full. The old man was there, arranging his herbs with gnarled hands, but his sharp eyes softened when he saw me. Pity, maybe, or recognition of a doomed man. "It came back, didn't it?" he said, not even needing to ask. I nodded, my throat tight, and told him about the scratches, the growls, the glimpse in the shadows. He sighed, long and weary, like he'd heard this tale 100 times before. "The bicho homem doesn't forget," he muttered, pulling me aside behind his stall where prying ears couldn't hear. "It's not just a beast, Jonas. Legends say it's born from a curse, old blood feuds in the jungle, shaman's wrath, or worse. Some fool who made a deal with the dark and paid with his humanity. It feeds on fear as much as flesh." He rummaged through a hidden box under his table, pulling out a small tarnished silver amulet shaped like a crescent moon, etched with symbols I didn't recognize. "This ain't much," he admitted, pressing it into my palm. "Silver burns 'em, or so the stories go. Wear it, keep it close, and fire, always fire. But if it's marked you, boy, you gotta face it. Running just makes the game longer." I asked if he'd ever seen one. Really seen it. His face darkened and he looked away toward the jungle fringe beyond the market. "Once. Long ago. Lost my brother to it. We burned the body, scattered the ashes in running water. That's the only way to end it for good, if you can kill it first." He wouldn't say more, just waved me off with a warning. "Next, full moon's coming. That's when it's strongest. Prepare or pray for a quick end." I walked back with the amulet, clutched in my fist, its cool metal a small comfort against the sweltering heat. The city buzzed around me, vendors shouting, cars honking, kids laughing, but it all felt distant, like I was already half in the grave. Back in the room, I showed Clara the amulet. She took it without a word, slipping it around Pedro's neck, instead of mine. "For him," she said, her voice steady but her eyes wet. We didn't talk about what came next, but I knew she was thinking it. We couldn't stay here. The city wasn't safe, nowhere was. But where do you run when the devil knows? "Your name?" That night, I reinforced the door with more scraps of wood I scavenged from a dumpster, and I lit a small candle in the corner. Not for light, but for fire, just in case. We ate a meager meal of rice and beans from a street vendor. The flavors. Ash in my mouth, and tried to pretend it was normal. Sleep came in fits, haunted by dreams of yellow eyes and tearing claws. Around 2 a.m., the witching hour, same as that first night on the farm, I jolted awake to a sound that made my blood freeze. Scratching, slow and rhythmic, right outside the window. Not on the boards I'd nailed up, but higher, on the roof maybe. I grabbed the knife and flashlight, motioning for Clara to stay back with Pedro, who was already stirring, his small hand reaching for the amulet. The scratching stopped, replaced by a heavy thump, like something landing softly on the ground, outside. I crept to the door, every muscle tensed, and listened, breathing, deep, ragged, just beyond the wood. And that smell again, stronger now, clogging my nostrils. blood and wet earth, like a fresh grave. I don't know what possessed me. Rage, maybe, or the last shreds of my courage. But I yanked the chair away and flung the door open, knife raised, flashlight beam stabbing into the night. There it was, not 10 feet away, crouched in the shadows of the alley. Taller than I remembered, its black fur matted with what looked like fresh blood, those yellow eyes locked on me like lasers. It didn't growl, it just stared, head tilted, as if amused by my pathetic weapon. A low chuckle rumbled from its throat, not animal, but almost human, mocking. Pedro screamed from inside, and that snapped something in me. I lunged forward, swinging, the knife wildly, yelling like a madman. The blade glanced off its arm, drawing a thin line of dark blood, and it recoiled with a hiss, the silver amulet's legend flashing in my mind. No, wait. The knife wasn't silver, but maybe the fury behind. It counted for something. It swiped at me, claws whistling through the air, missing my chest by inches as I dodged back. The force of the swing splintered the doorframe, wood flying like shrapnel. Clara was at the window now, boards pried loose, hurling the lit candle at it. The flame caught on its fur, a small blaze erupting on its shoulder, and it roared. That same hellish sound from the farm, thrashing to put it out. I seized the moment, slamming the door shut and barricading it again, my hands slick with sweat and a bit of its blood on the knife. The roar faded into the night, replaced by retreating footsteps, heavy, loping away into the darkness. We huddled together, shaking, waiting for dawn. It didn't come back that night, but I knew we'd only pissed it off. The blood on the knife was proof. It could bleed. Maybe, just maybe, it could die. Morning brought no peace. The alley outside was torn up, claw marks in the dirt, singed fur scattered like confetti from hell. Neighbors whispered, eyeing our door with suspicion, but no one asked questions. In the Amazon fringes, folks know better than to poke at shadows. I cleaned the knife, staring at the dark stain, and made a plan. No more running. The next full moon was in 3 days. I'd go back to the farm, or what was left of it, lure it there, away from the city, away from my family. Silver bullets. If I could find them, fire, whatever it took. Clara begged me not to, tears streaming, but I saw the resolve in her eyes too. End it, she whispered, clutching Pedro, or it'll never stop. I'm heading out tomorrow, armed with what little I can scrape together. The amulet, a makeshift torch, and that old shotgun I pawned back from a shady dealer in the market. Seu Raimundo gave me a vial of something he called Devil's Bane, herbs mixed with silver shavings to coat the bullets. I don't know if it'll work, but it's all I've got. If I don't come back, well, at least Clara and Pedro might have a chance to disappear, start over somewhere far. But I feel it in my bones. This ends with me and that monster, one way or another. The hunt's on, but this time, I'm not the prey. Pray for me, whoever's listening, because if I fail, that thing won't stop with me. It'll come for them next, and then, God help us all. The drive back to the farm felt like heading into the mouth of hell itself. I left Clara and Pedro at a dingy motel on the edge of Altamira, the kind of place where no one asks questions and the locks are more suggestion than security. Clara's goodbye kiss was salty with tears, her hands clutching my shirt like she could pull me back from the brink. Come back to us, she whispered, slipping the silver amulet around my neck instead of Pedro's. She'd insisted, saying I needed it more. Pedro just stared up at me with those haunted eyes, hugging his stuffed bear tight, and murmured, "Kill the hairy man, Dad." His words hit like a punch, fueling the fire in my gut. I promised them I would, though the lie burned my tongue. I didn't. Know if I'd make it out alive, but I'd damn well try to end this nightmare for them. The shotgun, road shotgun, pun intended, loaded with bullets I'd coated in Seu Raimundo's Devil's Bane, that gritty mix of herbs and silver shavings that smelled like earth and metal. In my backpack, I had matches, a can of gasoline scavenged from the gas station, and a makeshift torch, a sturdy branch wrapped in oil-soaked rags. The old F-1000 I'd bought back from the pawn shop rattled down the dirt roads, kicking up dust that glowed red in the setting sun. The jungle closed in as I got closer, the trees whispering secrets I didn't want to hear, their branches like claws reaching for the truck. Memories flooded back, the roar, the blood, the mangled bodies of my workers strewn like broken dolls. I gripped the wheel tighter, the amulet cool against my chest, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, legends held some truth. I arrived at the farm as dusk fell, the full moon already peeking over the horizon like a watchful eye. The place was a ghost of what it used to be. The house sagged under vines that had claimed it in my absence, windows shattered like accusing eyes, and the corral fence lay in twisted ruins. Bloodstains had faded to brown smears on the earth, but the air still carried that faint coppery tang. I parked the truck in the yard, engine off, and listened. Silence, thick and unnatural. No crickets, no nightbirds, as if the jungle itself held its breath. I stepped out, shotgun in hand, torch tucked in my belt, and poured a circle of gasoline around the old barn, the sturdiest structure left where I'd make my stand. If fire was its weakness, I'd turn this place into an inferno. Hours ticked by under the rising moon, its light bathing everything in silver that mocked the peace. I paced the barn, checking my traps, tripwires rigged with bells from the market, buckets of gasoline ready to tip and ignite. My heart thudded in rhythm with the distant howls of unseen animals, but I knew the real monster was coming. Around midnight, the wind picked up, carrying that familiar stench, blood and wet fur, stronger than ever. Then the growl started, low and rumbling, echoing from the tree line like thunder building in the distance. I lit the torch, its flame crackling to life, casting flickering shadows that danced like demons on the barn walls. "Come on, you bastard," I muttered, pumping the shotgun. "Let's finish this." It emerged from the jungle like a nightmare made flesh. Slower this time, deliberate, its massive form silhouetted against the moon. Taller than before, or maybe fear made it seem so, with muscles rippling under that thick black fur, claws glinting like knives. Those yellow eyes fixed on me, glowing with malice, and I saw the scar on its shoulder where my first shotgun blast had hit months ago. Proof it remembered, proof it hated. It didn't charge right away. It circled the barn, sniffing the air, testing the gasoline scent with a snort that sent chills down my spine. Smart, like So Raimundo said. It knew I was ready, and that made it cautious, or maybe just savoring the anticipation. I fired first, the shotgun bucking in my hands, the devil's bane-coated slug slamming into its chest. It roared, staggering back, dark blood oozing from the wound. But the silver must have done something because smoke curled from the hole, like it was burning from the inside. It lunged then, faster than anything that size should be, claws raking the barn door and splintering wood. I dodged inside, heart exploding in my chest, and kicked over a gasoline bucket. The liquid spread, and I tossed the torch. Flames whooshed. Up, a wall of fire between us. It howled in rage, swiping through the blaze, its fur singeing, but it pressed on, eyes locked on me with pure hatred. We clashed in the inferno, the barn turning into a blazing cage. It swatted the shotgun from my grip, claws grazing my arm and drawing hot blood that soaked my shirt. Pain exploded, but adrenaline numbed it. I grabbed the amulet, ripping it off and thrusting it forward like a talisman. The silver burned its paw as it grabbed for me, eliciting a yelp that was almost human. Seizing the moment, I doused it with the last of the gasoline from my backpack and struck a match. Flames engulfed it, racing up its fur like a fuse. It thrashed wildly, roaring so loud the ground shook, slamming into beams that cracked and fell, the roof groaning above us. I scrambled out as the barn collapsed, flames shooting skyward, the heat scorching my back. Outside, under the moon, I watched it writhe in the fire, its form twisting, shrinking. Wait, shrinking. The roars turned to screams, human screams, and through the blaze I glimpsed not a beast, but a man. Twisted, burned, but a man nonetheless. He crawled from the wreckage, fur melting away to reveal scarred skin, yellow eyes fading to dark brown, filled with agony and something like regret. "Why?" he rasped, voice guttural, collapsing in the dirt as the flames consumed. Him. I didn't answer. I just stood there, frozen, as the body charred to ash, the wind scattering it like dust. Dawn broke, the fire smoldering to embers, and the jungle sounds returned, birds chirping, life resuming as if nothing had happened. My arm throbbed, wrapped in a makeshift bandage from my shirt, but the weight on my chest was gone. The curse, the monster, it was over. I drove back to the motel, exhausted but alive, and when Clara opened the door, her face lit with disbelief and joy. I collapsed into her arms. Pedro hugged my legs, whispering, "You did it, Dad." We left Altamira that day, heading south to a new life, far from the jungle's shadows. But sometimes on full moon nights, I still glance over my shoulder, wondering if legends ever truly die. For now, though, we're free, and that's enough. Months blurred into a fragile normalcy after that fiery night at the farm. We settled in a small town down south near São Paulo, far from the jungle's grip, where the air smelled of rain on concrete instead of blood-soaked earth. I found work as a mechanic, fixing beat-up cars in a garage that hummed with the chatter of coworkers who didn't ask about the scars on my arm or the way I flinched at sudden shadows. Clara got a job at a local bakery, her hands dusted with flour instead of clutching a rosary in fear. Pedro started school, making friends, his drawing shifting from monsters to cars and soccer balls. The nightmares faded, or at least we pretended they did. Full moons came and went without incident, the silver amulet tucked away in a drawer like a forgotten relic. Life felt possible again. But peace is a thin veil, and mine started tearing at the edges one rainy evening in October. I was closing up the garage, wiping grease from my hands when my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It didn't end with him. Attached was a photo, a grainy shot of a moonlit field, scattered with mangled cattle, eerily like our old farm. My stomach dropped, the scars on my arm itching like fresh wounds. I deleted it, chalking it up to a prank, but sleep evaded me that night. The next day, another message. "The curse spreads. Check your boy." Panic clawed at me. I rushed home, bursting through the door to find Pedro playing in the yard, unharmed, but his eyes, they flicked yellow for a split second when he looked up. Or did I imagine it? Clara dismissed my worry as paranoia, but I saw the doubt in her gaze. That night, under a waxing moon, Pedro woke screaming, thrashing in his bed like something inside him was fighting to get out. His nails, usually blunt and childlike, had grown sharp, scratching bloody lines into his sheets. "It hurts, Dad," he whimpered, his voice deepening unnaturally. I held him down, Clara praying frantically as fur sprouted in patches on his skin, his teeth elongating before our eyes. The amulet, I grabbed it from the drawer, pressing it to his chest. It sizzled against his flesh, smoke rising, and he howled, a sound too big for his small body. The transformation halted, receding like a tide, leaving him exhausted and human again. But the message was clear. The werewolf's death hadn't broken the curse, it had passed it on. That final glimpse of the man in the flames, had he bitten me in the chaos? Or worse, infected Pedro through some unseen bond? We couldn't stay. I contacted Seu Raimundo through a mutual contact in Altamira. He was still alive, still peddling herbs and secrets. Over a crackling phone line, his voice grave, he confirmed my fears. The bicho homem isn't one soul, it's a chain. Killing. The host passes it to the killer, or the marked. Your boy. He must have been touched by its shadow. He spoke of a ritual, an ancient one from indigenous lore, requiring a journey deep into the Amazon to a hidden shaman's grove, where the curse could be unbound under a blood moon. But hurry, he warned. The full moon strengthens it. If it takes hold fully, he'll become the next. We packed light, leaving our new life behind like shed skin. The drive north was a reverse nightmare, the jungle welcoming us back with open, leafy arms. Pedro grew quieter, his episodes more frequent, claws emerging during tantrums, eyes glowing in the dark. Clara held him close, singing lullabies to soothe the beast within, while I drove through the night, the amulet around his neck our only ward. We reached the coordinates Seu Raimundo provided, a forgotten trail off the Trans-Amazonian Highway leading to a mist-shrouded village untouched by modernity. The shaman, an elderly woman named Yara with tattoos like river maps on her skin, greeted us without surprise, as if she'd been expecting us. The curse is old, she said, her voice like rustling leaves, examining Pedro by firelight in her hut. Born from greed, loggers who defiled sacred lands, twisted by spirits into guardians of vengeance. She prepared the ritual. Herbs burned. In a circle, chants echoing under the canopy, a potion brewed from rare roots and the ashes I'd brought from the farm. I'd scooped them up before leaving on a hunch. As the blood moon rose, eclipsed in red, a rare alignment, Pedro lay in the center, the amulet glowing hot. The air thickened, wind whipping through the trees, and shadows coalesced into forms, spectral wolves, howling accusations. Pedro convulsed, the beast emerging fully for the first time, fur covering him, muzzle forming, eyes blazing yellow. I held the shotgun ready, tears blurring my vision, prepared to end it if the ritual failed. Yara's chants peaked, stabbing a silver dagger, etched, with ancient runes, into the earth beside him. Lightning cracked without storm, striking the circle, and Pedro's form shuddered, the fur receding in waves of smoke that rose and dissipated into the night. He collapsed, human and still, the curse exorcised in a burst of ethereal light. The spirits faded, the jungle sighing in release. We stayed with Yara for days, healing, learning wards to protect against lingering echoes. Pedro woke with no memory of the horror, just a faint scar on his chest where the amulet had burned. We returned south, but wiser, carrying protective charms and a vow to never speak of it again. The texts stopped. The shadows stayed shadows. But on blood moon nights, I still check the locks, glance at Pedro's sleeping form, and whisper thanks to whatever forces spared us. The jungle keeps its secrets, and we've paid our debt. For now, the chain is broken. But legends whisper that curses like this, they always find a way back. Years slipped by like shadows fading at dawn, and our life in the South solidified into something resembling stability. Pedro grew into a teenager, tall, lanky, with Clara's kind eyes and my stubborn jaw, excelling in school, playing soccer, with friends, oblivious to the darkness we'd buried in the Amazon. The scar on his chest had faded to a faint white line, a whisper of the horror we'd escaped. Clara and I rarely spoke of it. We'd built walls around those memories, fortifying them with routine and laughter. I kept the silver amulet in a locked box under the bed, along with a vial of leftover herbs from Iara's grove, just in case. Full moons became mere calendar marks, no longer harbingers of dread. We were healing, or so I thought. It started subtly, as these things often do. One humid August evening, August 25th, 2025 to be exact, I was tinkering in the garage, oil under my nails, when Pedro burst in, face flushed from practice. "Dad, check this out," he said, thrusting his phone at me. On the screen was a news article. Mysterious animal attacks plague remote Para villages. Locals whisper of ancient curse. My blood ran cold. The photos showed mangled livestock, claw marks on huts that mirrored the ones from our old farm. Witnesses described a beast, tall, furred, with glowing yellow eyes. Cool, right? Like a real-life werewolf. Pedro laughed, oblivious to the way my hands shook. I forced a smile, muttering something about urban legends, but inside, the veil tore wide open. That night, sleep evaded me. I dug out the amulet, its weight familiar and foreboding, and scrolled through more reports on my phone. The attacks had begun months ago, escalating with each full moon centered around Altamira, the very fringes we'd fled. One detail chilled me. A survivor claimed the beast spared him after sniffing the air as if recognizing something, then vanished into the jungle with a human-like growl. Was it back? Or worse, had the ritual only displaced the curse, sending it to claim new hosts? Yara's words echoed. Curses like this, they always find a way back. I didn't tell Clara, not yet. She deserved the peace we'd fought for. The next day, an envelope arrived in the mail, no return address postmarked from Para. Inside was a crumpled photo. Our old farm, now overgrown ruins, but in the foreground, fresh claw marks gouged into the earth, forming crude letters. Jonas. My heart hammered. Tucked behind it was a note in shaky handwriting. It wears a new face. Come back, or it comes for you. Signed, Seu Heir. Raimundo. The old man was alive, or had been when he sent this. Panic surged. I called the number I had for him, but it rang dead. Clara found me staring at the photo, and the truth spilled out. Her face paled, but resolve hardened her eyes. We ended it once, she said, gripping my hand. We'll do it again, but Pedro stays here, safe. I couldn't leave them unprotected. We arranged for Pedro to stay with Clara's sister in the city, spinning a tale of a quick work trip north. He protested, sensing the lie, but hugged me tight before I left. Be careful, Dad. No more hairy men. His joke twisted the knife. I drove north alone, the amulet around my neck, shotgun in the trunk loaded with silver-tipped rounds I'd crafted. From melted-down jewelry and herbs. The journey blurred into a haze of highways and regret, the jungle reclaiming the landscape as I neared Altamira. Whispers in roadside diners confirmed the terror. Villages abandoned, shamans performing wards, authorities blaming escaped jaguars. But the locals knew better. I found Seu Raimundo in a rundown shack on the town's edge, frailer than before, his eyes milky with age but sharp with fear. You came, he rasped, ushering me in. The curse didn't die with the last host. It jumped to a logger, they say, one who desecrated the same sacred grounds that birthed it originally. Stronger now, angrier. He unfolded a map marked with attack sites, forming a pattern, a spiral closing in on Iara's village. It's seeking the source, the grove, to root itself deeper, become unstoppable. Why me? I demanded. He pointed to the amulet. You broke the chain once. It remembers. Spirits talk. It wants vengeance. We set out at dawn, Seu Raimundo insisting on guiding despite his frailty, armed with chants and a pouch of potent herbs. The trail to the grove was overgrown, the air thick with humidity and unseen eyes. As night fell, the full moon rose fat and mocking, and the growls began, distant at first, then closing in. We reached the clearing where the ritual had saved. Pedro, the ancient stones still humming with residual power. Seu Raimundo began chanting, drawing a protective circle with silver dust, but it was too late. The beast exploded from the trees, larger than before, fur mottled with scars, eyes blazing, like twin suns. It wasn't the same one. Its build was stockier, movements more feral, but the malice was identical. It charged, claws raking the air, and I fired, the silver bullet striking true, embedding in its flank with a sizzle. It roared, faltering, but lunged again, swatting So Raimundo aside like a rag doll. He crumpled, blood blooming on his shirt, but gasped. The heart. Aim for the heart. I dodged its swipe, claws grazing my side in a blaze of pain, and pumped another round. The beast reared, exposing its chest, and I pulled the trigger. The shot echoed, the creature staggering, collapsing in a heap as fur melted away, revealing a gaunt man, eyes wide in death, face twisted in eternal rage. So Raimundo died in my arms, his last words a warning. Curses evolve. Watch the boy. I buried him in the grove, under Iara's watchful spirits, and drove home, wounds bandaged, soul heavier. Pedro greeted me with a hug, but as the moon waned, I noticed his nails sharpening slightly in the light, eyes flickering yellow when he thought I wasn't looking. The chain wasn't broken, it had looped back to us. Clara and I shared a knowing glance. We'd fight again, teach Pedro the wards, prepare for the inevitable. Because in the end, some horrors don't end. They just wait for the next moon to rise. The signs in Pedro escalated like a storm building on the horizon. Subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. By the next full moon, his transformations weren't just flickers, they were surges, his body contorting in pain as patches of fur erupted like weeds through cracked soil, his voice cracking into guttural snarls that echoed through our modest apartment. Clara and I took turns restraining him, the silver amulet scorching his skin each time, buying us precious minutes until the episode passed. He'd wake disoriented, rubbing his temples, asking why his nails were bloody or why the furniture bore fresh scratches. We lied, bad dreams, sleepwalking, but his eyes, increasingly shadowed, told us he suspected more. I feel it inside me, Dad, he confessed one dawn, voice small, like something hungry. My heart shattered. The boy who'd survived the farm's massacre was now the battleground. We couldn't wait for the curse to consume him. I reached out to contacts from our Amazon days, whispers of shamans who'd inherited Iara's knowledge after her passing years ago. One name surfaced. Kai, a young healer in a remote Yanomami community, said to wield spirit wards stronger than silver. Clara insisted on coming, Pedro too, his teenage defiance masking fear. If it's in me, I fight it, he said, clenching fists that hid sharpening claws. We flew north under the guise of a family vacation, landing in Manaus before trekking, deeper into the rainforest by boat and foot. The jungle welcomed us like an old enemy, vines snaking, insects buzzing accusations, the air thick with the scent of decay and unspoken curses. Kai's village was a cluster of thatched huts ringed by protective totems, carved with fierce animal spirits. Kai himself was wiry, inked with glowing tattoos that seemed to shift in the firelight, his eyes holding the weight of ancestors. He examined Pedro under the canopy, palms pressed to the boy's chest, murmuring incantations that made the air hum. The curse clings like river mud, he declared, not just from the beast you slew, but rooted in the land's anger, deforestation, greed. It seeks vessels to punish. The ritual he proposed was riskier than Iara's, a spirit walk into the shadow realm, where Pedro would confront the curse's source, a primal entity born from violated earth. One goes in, Kai warned, but not always the same one comes out. We prepared under the waxing moon, fasting, smearing our bodies with sacred ash, drinking a bitter brew that blurred the edges of reality. As the full moon crested, bathing the clearing in ethereal light, Pedro lay on a bed of leaves encircled by glowing runes. Kai chanted, drumming a rhythm that synced with our heartbeats, and the world twisted, trees bending like liquid, shadows coalescing into forms. Pedro's eyes rolled back, body arching as the transformation hit full force. Fur sprouting, limbs elongating, a howl ripping from his throat that shook the leaves from branches. But this time, we didn't stop it. Kai guided it, channeling the beast into the spirit walk. I dove in after him, linked by blood and the amulet, my mind fracturing into visions, endless jungle devoured by machines, spirits wailing as trees fell, a shadowy wolf god rising from the carnage, its eyes yellow voids of rage. Pedro, half boy, half beast, faced it in the ethereal glade, claws extended, snarling defiance. "You don't own me," he roared, voice a mix of child and monster. The entity lunged, a blur of fangs and fury, but Pedro dodged, fueled by our family's resilience. I lent my strength, phantom shotgun blasts of silver light scorching its hide, while Clara's prayers echoed like barriers holding back tendrils of darkness. The battle raged in that liminal space, claws clashing, howls deafening, the ground splitting with ethereal cracks. The wolf god whispered temptations, power, vengeance against those who'd wronged the land, but Pedro resisted, tearing. At its core, with hands that shifted between human and claw, with a final, desperate surge, he plunged into its heart, unraveling the curse like pulling a thread from a tapestry. Light exploded, the entity dissolving into wisps that fed back into the jungle, nourishing, not destroying. We snapped back, to reality, gasping on the leaves, the moon waning as if spent. Pedro lay still, then stirred, human, unscarred, the yellow gone from his eyes forever. "It's quiet now," he whispered, smiling weakly. Kai nodded, exhausted but triumphant. "The land forgives, for now. But guard it. Greed awakens old wounds." We returned south, the curse truly shattered but wiser. Pedro joined environmental causes, channeling his hunger into protecting the Amazon. Clara and I watched him thrive, the amulet now a family heirloom, a reminder. On moonlit nights we share stories, not of horror, but of survival. Yet deep down, I know, the jungle never forgets. If the chainsaws return, so might the shadows. But for our family, the hunt is over. We've earned our peace. This is a fictional story created by AI, purely for entertainment purposes and not based on real events.